Hello, my name is Sanact, and today I'm going to be explaining how to create your Crusade army in order to play the Crusade mode of Warhammer 40,000. Within this, I will be discussing how to create your Crusade Force, the Crusade cards for your units, how the requisition point system works, and then two examples of Crusade forces. While there are aspects of narrative play, or the Crusade system, that differ to matched play, which most players will be used to, I will not be covering that today. I will be covering that separately. This will only talk about getting set up and ready to play, rather than an individual game. The Crusade system is Warhammer 40,000's narrative play mode. It is designed to link all of your battles together with a progression system, and to do this you will create a Crusade Force and then draw units from that for each of the battles you play. It is not designed for a competitive environment and is designed for more casual or narrative-minded games. If you wanted to play at a more competitive level, match play would be better, while this is not so much about winning as much as it is about the narrative. As we go through the process for creating your Crusade Force, I will be referring to an example Crusade Force that I have made for the Black Consuls, which are a successor chapter of the Ultramarines. Any text in blue will relate back to this example. On the left shown here is an example of a blank order of battle. This will be the summary of your Crusade Force and will include the name of your Crusade Force, the faction you've chosen to play, and your name. This contains a list of units that you can draw from for each game. Any other notes that you have can be written at the bottom. At the start of a crusade, you will have a supply limit. This is the maximum combined total of units you can have. Officially, you use the power level system and will have 50 power level available. However, it is very common for Crusades to operate using the point system, as it allows for that better granularity in your war gear selections. And if you do, you'll be using 1,000 points. Throughout this example, I will be using points. But if you are using power level, everything works in the same way. You will also start with 5 requisition points, which are the currency of the Crusade system. Your order of battle might not look exactly like the example shown on the left, but it will have a lot of similar features. Shown here is an example of what my Crusade Force's order of battle looks like at the start, with the section for individual units cut out. I have decided to call it the Praetors Vindictus. The Crusade faction is officially supposed to include your super faction, so Imperium, Chaos, Eldari, Orcs, Necrons, Tyranids, or Tau Empire. However, if you are playing one of those larger factions like Imperium, and you have no intent to bring 2 different types of factions, say Adeptus Auroritas and Adeptus Mechanicus, then if you're only bringing one, you can also add in the faction that you're choosing to play here. So because I am only taking Space Marines, I'm just going to list Space Marines there. I've then got my name, and I've listed 0 for my battle tally in Battles 1 because I haven't played any games yet. I've then marked down that I have 5 requisition points and a supply limit of 1,000, meaning that I'm starting with points. At the bottom, I have said what chapter I am, so Black Consuls, and then if you are playing a sub-faction that doesn't have preset rules, so whether that's a successor chapter, an ancient Necron dynasty, a custom sept for Tau, etc., you might also want to write the traits you've picked. Some factions, such as Thousand Sons, have a unique Crusade system where they're trying to gather arcane points, so if you have something like that, then you might want to keep track of it at the bottom as well. So here we have a template for a Crusade card. Every unit in your Crusade Force will have a Crusade card, which represents its equipment, loadout, its progression, and so on. So the top section in blue is all that you will need to fill out at the start. Everywhere below that, highlighted in yellow, will only take effect once you start playing games. So you'll need to have the name and the type of unit listed at the top. You'll need to have the number of models in the unit, your war gear selections, any psychic powers, and so on. You will need the cost of the unit. If you're playing power level, you will write the power level in, and the same for points. If you have any selectable keywords, such as chapter, sept, dynasty, or so on, you can write that in there. Any relics or warlord traits that you have, you will also need to write in. Although it is worth mentioning you don't get any of these for free. More on that later when we get to requisition points. It is worth pointing out that you cannot change a unit's size, war gear, or psychic powers at a later point without spending requisition points. You cannot change a unit's relics, warlord traits, or any other sort of upgrades like that. And also, if you decide a unit is from a certain sub-faction, you cannot change that sub-faction later. For example, if you said that your squad of breaches were from the Viola sept, you would not be able to change them to be from Tau sept later. So here we have 3 examples of the top section of a Crusade card for 3 units that have not played any battles yet. So in the top right, we have a captain in Gravis armor called Cranius Sternus, who is an HQ choice. They are from the Imperium with the Black Consoles selected keyword. I have written in that they cost 120 points. If you were using power level, then you would put that in instead. I've then written in his equipment. He has a Boltstorm Gauntlet and a Power Sword. He doesn't have any psychic powers as he isn't a character. As he isn't a psyker. And then he does not have any warlord traits or relics yet. On the left, we have a Riptide battlesuit with 2 shielded missile drones. So if you were giving them drones, because those are more models in the unit, you have to write down how many drones you have, and the same would apply for any unit containing multiple models. This Riptide costs 280 points, including its war gear and drones. It is a heavy support choice from the Farside Enclaves of the Tau Empire. I have then written in its war gear, and it isn't a character or a psyker, so it doesn't have a warlord trait, relic, or psychic power. In the bottom right, we have a unit of 5 Scarab Occult Terminators from the Thousand Suns, and I have decided they are from the Cult of Prophecy, so I would not be able to change their cult later. They are an elite's choice and cost 215 points. All of them have Inferno Combi Bolters and their Capeshas, and then I have given them a Hellfire Missile Rack and Soul Reaper Cannon on one of the Terminators. It is worth pointing out that if every single model in the squad has the exact same war gear, and they don't have any options for that war gear, you don't have to go into as much detail. As well, if a unit has some weapons that don't really define what it does, for example, an Intercessor squad is equipped with pistols and grenades, you don't need to list every single item of war gear if only some of them are going to be relevant. But for that Intercessor squad, you would need to say if the Sergeant has any weapons, is there a grenade launcher in there, what type of bolt rifle do they have, but you do not need to list they have grenades, because most of the time that's not even going to come up. Once you have finished a Crusade card for one of your units, you will need to update your order of battle with that unit. You only need to include the name and the points of that unit, and we'll get to Crusade points later. But for example, I have Cranius Sternus, who costs 120 points. So if I went to Cranius Sternus's profile, it would show that he is a captain in Gravis armor. If I wanted to, I could write that here next to his name, but I have decided not to make it look neater. I've then repeated this for all of the units I'm bringing, and you will then need to double check that the total cost of all of your units does not exceed your supply limit. I have done that, and I have made sure that the costs of all of my units add up to 1,000, so I would be all good there. Named characters can be taken in a Crusade, but they do work slightly differently. Due to their legacy, they cannot gain experience points, they do not get battle scars, and they can't gain battle traits either. However, they do get their warlord trait for free without having to spend any requisition points, or adding Crusade points, or even preventing another character from getting that warlord trait. So for example, if I was playing Thousand Suns and I wanted to add Ahriman to my Crusade Force, I can do that, and he will automatically get his warlord trait Otherworldly Prescience, but he will not be gaining any experience throughout the Crusade. As well, if I have another character that I wanted to give that same warlord trait, I could do that, as in Crusade, Ahriman does not stop me from giving another character that warlord trait. However, a common theme in a lot of Crusades is your game master might decide they don't want people taking a named character because of the narrative implications of it. So while officially there are no rules stopping you taking named characters, they're probably one of the first things that your game master might say no to because it might have implications on the narrative. So as stated earlier, requisitions, generally referred to as RP, are the main currency of Crusade. They're used to purchase various upgrades and abilities called requisitions. You will start with 5 requisition points at the start of a Crusade, and you will always gain 1 requisition point per battle, regardless of whether you win or lose, but you can gain more through certain effects. Regardless of how you are getting your acquisition points, you cannot stockpile more than 5 of them at any one time. If you have 5 requisition points and would gain more, you do not get any extra ones, and those leftovers would be discarded. So make sure that if you have 5 requisition points, you spend them before you would get more. So the main use of requisition points is to purchase requisitions. So there is a list of core requisitions which everyone can use, and then every 9th edition codex has a list of faction-specific requisitions. So if you are playing one of those factions with a 9th edition codex, check the narrative play section of your codex to find those requisitions. All of the core requisitions cost 1 requisition point, and so do most of the faction-specific ones. So one of the more common ones you will use is Increased Supply Limit, which will increase your supply limit by 5 power level if you're playing with the power level system, or 100 points if you're using points. This does not increase the amount of units you can take to an individual battle. This increases the pool of units you can pick from. Fresh Recruits allows you to add models to an existing unit. If it was below its maximum size, you can then increase it either by just more models or up to its maximum size. You can only do this if it is of the Battle Ready or Blooded rank, more on ranks when we get to an actual battle, and provided that it is of one of those 2 ranks, you can add models to that unit. If doing so would increase the power level or points, then you must do that. You cannot exceed your supply limit using this requisition. Rearm and Resupply allows you to change a unit's war gear choices, provided that it isn't a character unit. You cannot do this to change the number of models in that unit, which does mean you cannot use this to change the number of drones you have. And you also cannot change a unit's war gear if doing so would change the power level. Meaning that if you had a squad of Vanguard veterans and you wanted to give them jump packs, you can't do that because that would increase their power level. As well, if any of your war gear has been affected by a battle honor or a Crusade relic, then you cannot change that war gear. If you do change a unit's war gear and that would affect a unit's points, then you do have to update the points. And once again, you cannot do this if it would cause you to exceed your supply limit. Repair and Recuperate allows you to remove a battle scar from one of your units. We will talk more about battle scars when we get to a battle. There are 4 more core requisitions. So the first of these is Psychic Meditations, which allows you to reselect a Psyker's psychic powers. The new selection of psychic powers still needs to be a legal combination. For example, most Space Marine librarians have to take all of their psychic powers from the core book or all of them from their chapter's psychic powers. So if you use Psychic Meditations to reselect them, you do still have to obey this rule. Note that if you have a chaplain sort of unit, like an Ethereal, a Chaplain, or a Dark Apostle, you cannot use this to reselect their litanies. Specialist Reinforcements is the generic pre-battle stratagem upgrade. So when you add a unit, you can use this upgrade to give them the effect of that pre-battle stratagem, and then you add 1 Crusade point for every CP that stratagem would have cost. So, for example, if you are playing Necrons and you wanted to upgrade one of your overlords to be a Pharaon through the Hand of the Pharaon stratagem, you can only use that when you add that overlord to your order of battle, and you will have to add 2 Crusade points to your overlord. But you don't have to spend any command points at the start of each game when you do this. They just have that upgrade for the rest of the Crusade. There are a few interesting interactions with this. If you are playing either Imperial or Chaos Knights, the stratagem to upgrade one of your knights to a character does not also give you a Warlord trait. You have to spend 1 requisition point to upgrade them to a character, and another requisition point on the Warlord trait or Relic requisition, which we'll talk about shortly. If you are playing Space Marines or Adeptus Sororitas or any of the factions that have a stratagem to give a Sergeant or an Exarch or a Superior a Relic, you can still do that, but you have to do it when you add the unit to your order of battle. And lastly, if you are playing Space Marines as a successor chapter and you want to give one of your characters your founding chapter's relic, you can still do that, but you have to add 2 Crusade points instead of 1, and you can only have 1 of your chapter's relics at a time. Speaking of Warlord traits and relics, there is a requisition for that. So Warlord trait allows you to give a character a Warlord trait, but you can only use this when they are added or when they gain a new rank. This will add 1 Crusade point to that character, or if they are Titanic, like a Knight, you have to add 2 Crusade points instead. Every Warlord trait in your army has to be unique, and you cannot give 2 Warlord traits to the same character. The only exceptions to these Warlord trait rules are named characters, who do not need to use this requisition to get their Warlord trait. They do not have to add Crusade points, and they do not stop another character from taking that Warlord trait. Relics work in the same way as the Warlord trait requisition. You give a character a relic, add 1 Crusade point, and then you can't have 2 of the same relic in your army. Crusade points, which are commonly abbreviated to CRP, are a measure of a unit's upgrades and bonuses. Every unit will start with 0 Crusade points, and any upgrades they have, such as relics, warlord traits, or battle honors, they will increase that unit's Crusade points. and any battle scars they have will decrease that unit's crusade points. Crusade points are only relevant when you are playing a game, and it shows if one person's army has more total upgrades than another person's army. We'll talk more about how that works when we get to an actual battle. So here we have the example requisition point usage for my Crusade Force. So as always, I start with 5 requisition points. I have decided to spend 1 requisition point to give a relic to my captain, Cranius Sternus, which adds 1 crusade point to him. I have decided to give him a warlord trait as well, using another requisition point, which adds 1 more crusade point to that captain. I've then given a warlord trait to another character and a relic to a 3rd character. This leaves 1 requisition point spare, which I'm keeping in case any of my units suffer battle scars. You do not have to spend all of your requisition points. You technically don't have to spend any of them. However, it is worth pointing out that since you start with 5 and will automatically gain 1 after your first battle, if you have 5 requisition points at the time of your first battle, because you can only stockpile 5 requisition points, you won't be able to gain another. So I would always recommend spending at least 1 or 2 of your requisition points to start with. Other requisitions that you can use when you start a crusade include the increased supply limit requisition and the specialist reinforcements requisition, along with any faction-specific requisitions. So here I have written some guidelines for creating your crusade roster, although these are not rules, they are merely guidelines. So the first one is make sure you can create a battle-forged army out of the units in your crusade roster, as even though it isn't match play, crusade mode still requires you to make battle-forged armies. The common early battle sizes are 25 power level or 500 points, and 50 power level or 1000 points, so you will need to make sure that you can create an army which can be fielded at these sizes. If you are going to be playing a 25 power level or 500 point game, you are only able to include a single patrol detachment unless you're playing knights, but assuming you aren't playing knights, you will need to have at least 1 HQ choice and 1 troops choice in order to field a patrol detachment for these smaller games. Keeping in mind that it is narrative play and not matched play, you should probably try and avoid bringing too many overly strong units to reflect that this isn't a tournament. As well, I would recommend trying to keep your list somewhat diverse and not spamming one of the same type of unit too much. No one's going to like playing 30 Terminators. So here we have the completed example Crusade Force that I have created, the Praetors Vindictus. I won't go through everything here, but in effect, it is a 1000 point Crusade Force from the Black Consoles chapter of Space Marines. I have spent 4 of my 5 requisition points, and I have taken a pair of HQs, 2 troops, 2 elites, a fast attack, and a heavy support. I have tried to avoid taking too many meta units, and I've made sure that even if I play a 500 point game, I can still field a combination of units to make a 500 point army. If you want to look at this further, you can pause now. So here we have an example of what might be a less ideal Crusade Force, which I have made for the Tau Empire using the Vulcan set. So One of the issues with this list is that the only combination of units that could be fielded under 500 points and fit into a patrol detachment would be the Ethereal, the Commander, and the Strike Team, which is about 300 points, because you cannot fit the Crisis Suits into that small of a game and still have a legal detachment, and the same for the Storm Surge. Another issue is that even in larger games, 5 Crisis Suits with 8 Shield Drones supported by an Ethereal and a Commander is a very strong combination, which is going to kill a lot of things fairly easily. Similarly, the Storm Surge is incredibly difficult to deal with in smaller games, especially in Crusade, where many people aren't taking the sort of anti-tank needed to gun it down, especially in smaller games. As well, if you run into an Imperial Knights player, you're just going to shoot them off the table with very little effort. It is worth pointing out that this was made prior to the most recent point changes and balanced data slate. In summary, in order to create your Crusade Force, you will need to pick the faction you wish to play as. You will need to add 1,000 points or 50 power level worth of units to your Crusade Force. You will need to fill out the Crusade cards for those units, and then you will need to spend the requisition points you have available. Once you have done that, you will be ready to play your first game. And with that, I would like to thank you for your attention. Good luck with creating your Crusade Force, and happy Crusade.